Your Creative Push, episode 29.
Get off your tush and do it. Just do it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Ronnie Allen. Ronnie is a New York City native, born and bred in Brooklyn, New York, where she was a teacher at the New York City Department of Education for 33 years. In the early 90s, she began a journey into holistic healing and alternative therapies and completed her PhD in Parapsychic Sciences in 2001. Along the way, she has picked up many certifications. She is a board-certified holistic health practitioner, as well as a crystal therapist, Reiki practitioner, metaphysician, dream analyst, and Tarot Master Instructor. Now, Ronnie, what people listening might not know about me is that I love that kind of stuff. I actually have my throat chakra candle lit right now, and I'm into crystals and all that stuff. So before we get into like the writing and all that other stuff, could you maybe take us down that path and tell us how you got into that and what that brings to your life?
Oh, absolutely. I had started in screenwriting and film and acting in the late 70s. And as I was writing screenplays, I was doing a lot of research on mythology, the Greek and Roman goddesses, and I found out that Isis was the first doctor. Now, being a lifelong asthmatic and nearly dying from it several times, which I guess we'll talk about later as it comes through in my novel, I decided to investigate that. I'm a Gemini, true and form. I'm a green personality. I need to learn and I need to do. So as I started researching the goddesses, I started getting into crystals, and I saw how crystals are used for healing. I have mine on now too, by the way, and they're actually very potent. They're from the earth, and each stone, each color of the stone resonates with a different part of the body. So I was using them to heal myself. When I saw the healing power, I got into taking certification courses so that I'd be able to work with others, because it's really not appropriate to work on others without having the certification. So once I got the certification in crystal therapy, and I worked with a protege of Katrina Raphael, who wrote a wonderful trilogy on the subject, I started delving further, and I got into the Reiki. I combined Reiki with crystal healing. Reiki is actually hands-on touch, whereas with crystal therapy, my hands are about an inch above the stones that I lay on the body. Then I got into tarot, and I went for tarot certification on that because I wanted to be the best I could be. And I'm always pushing myself to be the best I could be. So when I got the certification, I was never short of clients to practice on. I would do them in my school during lunch hour. And people were lined up. And I saw that I was pretty darn accurate because I definitely used my intuition, which I'm sure I had even before I went on this path. So I continued for certification, and I continued to get my PhD in holistic health.
Very cool. And how has that kind of fallen into your writing as well? Do you incorporate that into your books as well?
Yes. My characters in Gemini, my main character, Dr. John Trenton, is both psychic and clairvoyant. He uses the crystals he carries with him in his pocket. When someone reads the book and they actually want to find and make contact with their spirit guide, he does. And he has a spirit guide named Max, who's been with him since he's a toddler. And people can actually learn how to do it on their own. So yes, the alternative therapies that I teach, he does. And my antagonist in Gemini, Dr. Barbara Montgomery, She was a stripper by night, school psychologist by day. I had that job in New York City. I have my license in school psychology.
I was going to say, which job?
Which job? Not the stripper. Not the stripper. The stripper may be in fantasy, but
right.
we're all working through fantasy when we're writing. I mean, that's the creativity of an author. So she has the position that I had. I didn't work in that capacity. I worked in crisis intervention to start, and I worked with teachers and children in trouble. So all of that is in my novels, as is in Gemini as well.
Very cool. And I love that you put a piece of yourself into your work, as well as, as you said, like your fantasy. Could you go a little bit deeper into and talk about your series, The Sign Behind the Crime books?
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure. Gemini's the first, came out last June.
Mm-hmm.
Aries came out in January of this year, January 23rd. And there was a 7-month break between them because my publisher wanted at least that span between releases. What happened was I started writing Aries before my contract on Gemini. So I was really undecided about going with the same character. So Dr. Frank Chaos originated, and he's polar opposite to Dr. Trenton in physicality, behavior, attitude. And as I was writing him, I had gotten the contract in June of 2015. And I started writing. I got the contract in June 2014. It was released in 2015. With a traditional publisher, it can take up to a year or more. So even though I started writing Aries in 2014, when I got the contract on Gemini, I was almost finished with Aries, and I submitted it a few months later. Because of my writing strategies, which I'll be happy to talk about, Aries got accepted the first time out with a contract 2 weeks later.
Wow.
So I know my writing strategies work, which I'd love to share with your listeners as well.
Absolutely. Could you please?
Basically, I'm a plotter. A plotter is someone who takes a lot of notes. I work with a large spiral notebook. In fact, at the pool, when I was writing, some women came over to me and said, "What are you writing, the great American novel? I've never seen a notebook like that." And I said, "Yes, I am writing a novel." She had no idea that I was an author. But cool. People see me and they see the process I go through. I take a lot of notes. I write out full character descriptions, profiling, and you can get profile sheets online. I can start with my antagonist, and I like to write bad girls. My antagonists in Aries and Gemini are women. So women serial killers, which are against the norm.
Right.
But that's what I like.
Very cool. And like, so when you kind of decided to make, because there's going to be 12 of these books, right?
If I live long enough. I'm no youngster. So I plan to write Scorpio. I finished Scorpio by August of this year. I figured a year a novel. With a traditional publisher, it takes a year. Aries took 14 months to get out.
Did you have like kind of like a plan for each one, or do you are you taking them as they come?
Well, I'm taking them as they come, but it's interesting. At every event I do, I have a sign up and a little box with Post-its, and I ask people to name the fourth book in the series, what sign they'd like it to be. So they put their vote in, and I'm tallying them up, and by the time I finish writing Scorpio and I start the fourth book, I'll tally them, and whichever sign has the most votes will be the title of the fourth book. Very cool.
I mean, I think that's a cool way to do it. So you say you want to do like a book a year, and that takes, a lot of discipline. What are some strategies that you have? Like if, say, you wake up in the morning and you don't quite feel like working today, what are some things that you do to kind of force yourself to do the work?
There's so much a writer can do aside from writing the actual manuscript. There's marketing, there's social media, there's blogging. Whatever you can do to get your mindset of getting words out onto paper pushes you forward. So I don't necessarily work on the manuscript every day, but I'm on social media every day, whether it's Facebook, Twitter. This morning I did LinkedIn. I'm writing an article, an interview for a major magazine, which will come out in March. So whatever you can do will promote you and get you into that mentality. To have the author's mentality, the writer's mentality, you have to write. It's like getting your tush in the seat and either the laptop or the iPad, in your hands and doing something. I also give myself deadlines publicly. On social media, I put it up a couple of weeks ago. My goal to finish Scorpio and have it submitted is by August. That accountability will pin me to it.
Yeah, I think it's really good to give yourself deadlines, and like you said, sometimes when you give them just in your own head, in your own imagination, it's hard to kind of stick by them. But when you do put it out publicly like that, if you just tell one person, even that can keep you accountable. I don't know if you've ever heard of Parkinson's law.
No.
But it's like the theory that basically you get things done in the time allotted for it. So like you can get stuff done if you say, I'm going to do this tomorrow. But if you say that you're going to get it done in 2 weeks, you'll get it done like in 2 weeks. So it's really good, I think, to give yourself kind of strict deadlines and maybe even push yourself with that.
Pushing what you just said is very important. You can't lay down and say and procrastinate and make excuses, because the longer you don't write, there's more of a chance of getting writer's block.
Absolutely.
And you want to avoid that at all costs. I, for one, never get writer's block because I'm always shooting for something. And setting goals are very important. As you said, that's Parkinson's law. Right.
Setting goals is really important. And I'd like to get back and just touch on what you said about, if you're not feeling the creative juices flowing with writing, a lot of other people that I've interviewed have also said this, you can't force it. So it is good to have those days set aside for, promotion or, even looking at reading other people, or if you're, an artist, looking at other artists for, inspiration and kind of drawing from that. I think that's a really good strategy.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Could you take us back to your first, or maybe one of your first creative moments, whether it was writing or with something else, and tell us that story?
Absolutely. But we're going back into the 70s, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm happy to go back there with you.
I started teaching in 1970, and I taught 33 years in New York City. So by the mid to late 70s, I was going through a bored streak. And as a Gemini, I need to multitask. I mean, that's part of our sign. And I decided to go to acting school in Manhattan. I went to Sylvia Lee Showcase Theater and Stellar Adler, and I really liked acting. And it sort of got me to wanting to do more about acting in characters. So when I took screenwriting there too. It was the first screenwriting lessons I took. And I really perfected it. I wrote for feature film, television. I never got produced, but I did go through 3 agents. And just when they were ready to get my TV scripts into the episodic shows that I was writing for, the shows went off the air. So that was my luck. But anyway, the first creative moment was seeing, I could really think about getting my characters on paper. And people always tell me when they read my books, it's very cinematic. They can actually see the film crossing behind them. And my goal is actually to get Gemini into a TV episodic. I think it would work wonderfully for there. And I like Aries on the film, as a feature. So that's where my vision is. Creativity comes from the excitement of seeing your words on paper and getting the emotionality.
For yourself, first and foremost, to have that kind of emotion. But then, as you said, when you can share it and when other people are able to, I think that's such a compliment to you that, they can see it as a movie, because that means they're like kind of seeing it perfectly in their mind's eye. And I think that's like the absolute best compliment you can get as a writer, because you're doing your job.
Yes, you want to be able to see it. You want to take your hands and put them over your eyes, on the side of your eyes, and be focused and see it play in front of you. Reading can be an escape. Readers want to read characters that go beyond the daily existence. And that's why there are so many different genres that are successful. People love going into the historical realms and historical novels. We haven't lived there, but it's going back, and it's truly an escape, and it's an escape for a writer also. For me, writing is a catharsis. I can get out emotions, do things that I wouldn't dare do in real life, like murder, or be the psychopathic person and enjoy writing it. And people like to see people going to extremes. That's why your heroes have to do things beyond the norm.
Going along with that, as a writer, sometimes I struggle with this too, is like what you seem to be very good at is kind of putting your, what do you call it, fantasies or things that you would never do in real life out there, like murder or like being a stripper, for instance.
Right.
What advice would you give to somebody who's kind of fearful of writing that way, of writing fantasy, because they're afraid that what they're writing kind of represents themselves?
Very good question. I think people need to get over that, to be able to move forward into doing that, because if they're in their comfort zone and they're writing only what they do on the mundane level, what everyone else would do, they may not come out with a property that a reader might want to fly away with.
Right.
So I did a lot of self-talk, a lot of meditation. I'm not shy anyway, as you could probably guess, but it's something a writer needs to move on from, that insecurity, about not letting it all out on paper. And very often authors or even readers sometimes think, oh, your real life is like that.
Right.
That all the sex we put into our romance novels are indicative of our sex lives. It's not. It's okay to go beyond, what you feel comfortable with. And once you start doing it, and you can even write for yourself, once you start doing it, it becomes easier.
Yes, for sure. I think you nailed it. I think it's just kind of starting it and seeing where it goes, and you might surprise yourself too.
Very much surprise yourself. When I get into such deep POV with my characters, it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
It's like your unconscious, your subconscious takes over. And that's what writers need to do, to be able to get into such deep POV. You let your characters take you where they want to go. So it's not you. You put it on your character. Well, it's their fault I went that way.
Right. Yeah, you put the onus on them. I like that.
Yeah.
Could you take us back and tell us the story of one of your worst moments?
Yes. And that also goes back a very long time, but it stayed with me forever. I was a freshman in college on Long Island. So I was all of 19. So we're going back a good 46 years.
Okay.
All right. So it's a long time for a memory.
Absolutely.
And it's so important. And we'll get into something else also, but an English teacher. And I'm sitting in front of the class because I always like to sit in the front. A teacher came over with a paper that he marked an F on. He slams it down on my desk, face down, and he said to me in front of the class, loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You write like a 3-year-old."
Ooh.
I'll tell you, that stuck with me. And my goal, maybe it also was with a Gemini, my goal was to prove this man wrong. He wasn't a youngster. He might have been in his 40s at the time. I don't even know if he's still around. I don't remember his name. I remember his face. But that carried with me through college, through my master's dissertation, and I did a full dissertation, through writing in my holistic healing, and I've been published in several professional journals, alternative health journals. I also published 2 nonfiction books on screenwriting. It stayed with me through my novel writing, through being published, and it's always that doubt of not good enough. And it's like, wow, it's so not true, because I am good enough. My publisher thinks I'm superb, and writers think I'm superb, and authors and readers do. So it's a memory that sticks, and it takes so much energy to put it on the back burner and not think of it. But that memory from, early education, and I was 18 at the time. Mm-hmm. So it sticks. And that's why I'm such an advocate for the child. And even in Gemini, the theme of it is the horrors of child abuse. And child abuse is emotional as well as physical. But something like that was probably my worst memory that would cause resistance in success. But obviously I beat it, because when someone says to me, you can't, my answer to them is, try me.
Nice. Well, first of all, I think everybody will join me in saying, fuck that guy.
Exactly.
I think that you definitely have proven him wrong. And, oh man, what a bad person. That's terrible.
Yeah, especially for an educator.
Absolutely. That's I'm glad that you have been able to prove him wrong. What advice would you give to somebody who has maybe not had such a brazen negative comment about them or their work? What would you suggest to somebody who has had somebody say something negative to them in that way, a non-helpful negative comment? What strategies did you use to really get over that, aside from just making awesome work and proving him wrong?
That to me is major. Very often writers, when they submit their work, can go through many submissions. A rejection, it means you're only one step closer to getting a yes. And that's what we tell even in my other businesses. You get a no, you're one step closer to getting that one yes. I was very, very fortunate. Gemini was accepted after a relatively few submissions, and Aries was accepted the first time out. But the first rejections I got on Gemini, all the agents and editors said the same thing. I had POV, point of view issues. I went back. I didn't give up. I fixed it. Mm-hmm. The question is, if you're getting rejections and people are saying negative things, critique partners, beta readers, and sometimes the critique partner could be harsh. I've had wonderful ones, so I didn't experience that. But from what I'm hearing, through social media and other contacts, she trashed my work. If it resonates with you to make those changes and you think it will make your property better, do it. Rewrite it as best you can to make it be something you want. If someone's suggestions do not resonate with you and you really feel for your property that you want it like this and it's working, do it your way. If you get 40 rejections, I would say even after 5 or 6 rejections, take a look back and see what you can rewrite. There's a saying, if you keep doing the same things over and over again, you can't expect different results.
Right.
Same thing with writing. Take a look at your property. I always tell my writing students, writing is rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And I've been told, don't fall in love with your words. You may have to get rid of some things that you really love if it doesn't work. I mean, I wound up trashing a 50,000 word novel. I was halfway through. I write long, so my novels go about 124,000. But
Wow.
I was at 50K, and I realized everyone else liked it. I did not like my heroine. It's what we call a too stupid to live heroine. I trashed the book, but I pulled things out of it, and it transformed into Aries, which is now published. But if I kept working on it and I didn't like it, if you don't like your book, chances are a publisher won't. To get over that, if people say they're trashing, they're getting negative reviews, in this industry, we have to be what we call bulletproof. Because yeah, you are going to get the naysayers. You are going to get negative feedback, and you are going to get no's. But you have to work around it and see what's a reliable source. And also with a critique partner, I suggest getting someone who works in your genre so they know where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's great advice to not only to get that trusted kind of source of both inspiration and critique that you can, really trust and also respect. But like you said, is also kind of trusting your own intuition, your own kind of heart, what you want in the whatever it is that you're doing, and kind of knowing when you get that, that no or that negative comment, kind of knowing what makes you and makes your work yours. If you kind of agree with what they're saying, then chances are you definitely should change it.
Exactly. And if you're going for submission, you have to look for a publisher that publishes what you want. I write cross genre, so I have paranormal, romance, and thriller in there. If I submitted to a publisher who didn't want romance, it wouldn't be taken. And that's why a lot of authors get rejected, because they're not doing their research on what publisher to submit to. I was very fortunate to find my publisher, Black Opal Books, who likes cross-genre. So I was really in sync with what they do. So you have to look at that, and that's a cause of a lot of rejections. And I follow on something on Twitter called 10 Queries, hashtag 10 Queries, where editors and agents give feedback on the submissions they received. 90% of the tweets that come through from agents is that the author did not read their submission guidelines. And that's an automatic rejection.
For sure. And going with that, I think it's good to, write what you want to write, and not necessarily like find a publisher that you want to publish with, and just kind of write based on what you think that they'll like, right?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't exactly write for a specific publisher.
Right.
Just in case it doesn't pan out.
Right.
Write what you want and then find a publisher that fits you.
Yeah, and do your research too, so you don't get those rejections just for not doing your due diligence, because that can hurt.
It hurts, and it's a waste of time.
Yeah. It's
a heavy waste of time, especially waiting for that response, because you're on pins and needles. Let's face it, we're all nervous.
Sure, absolutely. Ronnie, we are running out of time, so could we go into what I call the final push?
Absolutely.
And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of somebody you've already inspired today and give them that push into doing their creative endeavors.
Get off your tush and do it. Just do it.
Nice.
Planning, thinking, you can overplan. You can overthink. Ask yourself, and this is all over everywhere, and I'm sure this is nothing new. Ask yourself where you want to be in 5 years. 5 years will pass no matter what you do. So if I say I want to get out this number of manuscripts in 5 years, and I don't do it, 5 years are going to pass anyway. And then what? So start researching. That's your first step. Take a step. Write out baby steps to get what you want. If you can't write a full manuscript, start with a short story. Start with something where you can say you have a beginning, middle, and end, and you accomplished it. You may have to give up things. I gave up going out with friends. I gave up my mahjong group.
No.
Yes, I did. Because I wanted this so badly, it took precedence. So you have to have a passion. It's not like starting a manuscript and saying, I'll get the passion to finish it after. The writing, it has to be in your blood. If you're in network marketing, you have to be the type who wants to go out and meet people, because you can't do that industry without talking to people. So it's basically finding your passion and taking baby steps.
Get off your tush.
Get off your tush, or on
No.
your tush to sit on if you're on the laptop.
Yeah. No, I love that, and yeah, you're right. You do have to give stuff up, and you'd be surprised once you kind of get in the groove and get in the habit of doing it for a month or so. You kind of look back at, the Mahjong group or watching movies or whatever it may be, and you might not realize that you don't even miss it because you have this new thing.
Well, you might, I don't know. I do miss it, and I do miss Mahjong, and I try going once in a while when I can, if I'm not on deadline. Like now, February, I'm on deadline. I have a lot of things coming up. So it's been an awesome pleasure speaking with you. I'm so excited about this.
Ronnie, thank you so much for coming on the show and for giving us that push today.
Oh, you're very welcome.
And you can find Ronnie on Facebook. She is Ronnie, RONNIE Allen, ALLEN .507, or Ronnie Allen Novelist. Those are her two Facebook pages. And on Twitter, she is Ronnie A. Novelist, as well as Pinterest and Instagram, right?
Yes.
But Twitter and Facebook is where you're at mostly?
Mostly, yes.
You can also check out her website, RonnieAllenNovel.com, with all the resources. You can find her books there, and I highly suggest you do. You can pick it up for $3.99. Ronnie, thank you so much again for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad I was invited.
Thank you so much, Ronnie, for coming on the show. It's so funny because I'm starting to fall in love with this idea that Ronnie mentioned about asking yourself where you want to be in 5 years. When I graduated college and got asked that question, actual job interviews, I always thought it was a strange one because at that time, 5 years was such a huge chunk of time, and a question that was virtually impossible for me to answer back then. As a human being with 22 years of experience, yes, but basically just a guppy, just like a tadpole in terms of real world experience. I remember even answering that question by reciting one of my favorite Mitch Hedberg jokes, where he was asked that very question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And his answer was celebrating the 5-year anniversary of you asking me that question. And I literally said that in a job interview. Now that I'm 30, I feel like I have a better grasp on, what 5 years actually does mean. I've had a couple more 5-year chunks of life experience to deal with, and, I've seen how much can change in some respects and how little things can change in others. My life is way different than it was back then in terms of career, relationships, and my outlook on like so many different things. But only very recently has it changed in terms of what I really want to get out of, my own life. But I just have this appreciation for what 5 years can be and what you can accomplish in 5 years' time. But at the same time, how quickly those 5 years can just fly by, leaving you kind of regretting the fact that you basically did none of the things that you thought about doing all of that time. And like Ronnie said, those 5 years tick by no matter what. So you can't stop the passage of time, but you can fill that passage of time with things that you do want to get out of life. So I love that idea, and thank you to Ronnie for, bringing it back up. You don't need to be on a job interview to ask yourself that question. So I challenge you. What do you want to get out of your life in 5 years' time? Where do you see yourself, and where would you like to see yourself, and how can you get there? But 5 years is a long time, so let's just concentrate on today. So all you have to do today is go home, or if you're home already, and just do that creative thing that you want to do, that you've been thinking about for 5 years or more, and just do it. So get on it. Tomorrow on the show, we have Brett Gaida.
But the good news was I was trying, like I was swinging the bat. So I wasn't just sitting in my room trying to figure it out. I was trying to figure it out through action, which is, I would also say, is a good piece of advice, I believe. Because if I find 10 things I don't want to do, I'm still closer to what I do want to do. And so I think for me, it was really just getting to the point where I figured out the idea. And I was like, yes, this is it. It's this show called Where There's Smoke that I've had in my head for years about, kind of taking current events and filtering them and looking at self-development. And then it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to make it work. And again, I just put myself into action.
Brett is an awesome dude. He is one of my heroes. He is a podcaster. He is a writer. He is a businessman. He is the man, basically. He hosts one of my favorite podcasts, and one of the reasons that I got into podcasting, a podcast called Where There's Smoke. And if you haven't heard it already, I suggest that you do. One of my favorite podcasts. Definitely check it out. And be sure to listen tomorrow, because it was a great interview and really an awesome experience for me to be able to talk to a guy that I really look up to and somebody whose view on creativity that I really trust. So that's for you tomorrow if you need the push, but hopefully you were inspired enough today to get some work done. So go and do some work. Have a great and productive day, and we will see you tomorrow.